History is the story of man's inhumanity to man, conquest, imperialism, slavery, the literal sacrifice of human lives to appease one group against another, or even, they imagine, to appease their deities. No one group of people, language, race, nation, time of human history has any sort of monopoly on these tragic and horrific sorts of events. That would be the large takeaway message of 2006, the Mel Gibson produced film Apocalypto. Apocalypto gives us insight to a specific time and place in the universe with brilliant, just genius. A snippet in the life of an ordinary village, undescribed location in Central or South America, but we get that it is the Mayan Empire or its region. Later on, we're able to piece it together. We begin with a small village of native people speaking their native tongue, doing their native thing. In fact, the first time I saw this in the theater, there were no subtitles to it. You were supposed to figure out what was going on by the context. I missed a lot. Later on, when you were able to see it with subtitles, I learned a lot more about the details of the plot. But it drove home that idea of seeing through a keyhole across time, seeing this snippet of these events, not knowing all of what was going on, but like an alien researcher through a super telescope, watching these events unfold and seeing it for yourself and trying to decipher what these strange and alien things were. Right away, we get from the protagonist by their interaction, despite how gross some of it is, that they are timelessly people. It's a group of men out hunting, men being men, boys will be boys, doing ridiculous things to one another, a little bit of fighting, a little bit of disrespecting, all the sort of ordinary things that dudes do when dudes hang out. And that is clearly timeless, whether you're going out of the cave to go hit a dinosaur over the head, or whether you are these people living in this period, or anybody now at a bowling alley. We get a nice sort of introduction to their life in the village, the demands of their culture, the expectation of having children, carrying on new generations, trusting the spirits of your ancestors to guide you and protect you, all sort of the basic stuff about their life. They encounter out in their hunt a group of apparently what we would call refugees, people fleeing from the ravaging of their land by an unspoken of force. There's a deal worked out with a trade, polite trade of their fish that they caught and some of the meat taken in the hunt, and permission to travel through the land looking for another place unoccupied beyond. But it does not take long before we learn that hot on the trails of the ravaging of that land will be the ravaging of this one, where our protagonists live, will be massacred. And as soon as we have learned about their life, their interaction, their relationships, and just enough that we kind of care, we care enough to see them get ravaged and destroyed by an invading imperial force, which turns out to be the Mayans. The Mayans in turn take these men, some of them, as living sacrifices to their god, to Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl, depending on which version, and I'm probably pronouncing it poorly, but it's the best that I got for you. Some of the people will be sold as slaves, and the weird turnabout takes place with a young man from the village whose mother-in-law was bullying him about the fact that he had not produced an heir, is suddenly someone that nobody wants on the slave blocks. Nobody will buy her, and she is essentially turned loose in a world where everything she ever loved or cared about has been destroyed. And now nobody wants her. And her son-in-law apparently going off to be sacrificed in the temple. The weird turnabout that like this morning, roughly, they had this whole dynamic going on in their culture within their day-to-day life, intruded on by this other force, and now literally the whole universe is different for them by nightfall. And so it goes on from there. And two of our protagonists end up escaping, especially our chief. Hunter, from the beginning, manages to escape after not being sacrificed, being taken to the ball court where they would be killed in sort of a mock hunt. He manages through great desperation to escape and get back to the village. He had hidden his wife pregnant wife and child in a deep chasm. He was determined, desired, prayed, wanted to live to get back to them. He couldn't just check out, as he says, while he's waiting to presumably be sacrificed at one point. I can't leave, not now. Must get home to home and family. And so the chase ensues. The Mayans, in the end, spoiler alert, in the end, we get the sighting of a European ship. This is the time when the Europeans are arriving. What we have learned in the meantime, the Mayans are suffering from plague, from a lack of faith, from rebellions of people that now questioned their commitment and strength. Were the gods turning on them because of their plague, or were they becoming weaker? Was the time right to rise up? And of course, if you know history, all this plays together with the arrival of the Spaniards and being able to recruit from the oppressed and abused tribes around the empire to get those people to help you overthrow the old regime. You see, you begin in the morning, an ordinary, happy hunting life in a village, and your whole universe is changed by an empire that cares nothing for you. But then again, by nightfall, the beginning of the next part of the cycle, the great empire that used and abused you and slaughtered most of you is now going to have its whole universe turned upside down by the arrival of somebody else. Hence, the cycle keeps going and the cycle never ends. This is a tragedy of history in which terrible, terrible things are done. But again, it has nothing to do with the arrival of the white man in the New World. That doesn't really change anything except which empire is on top at the moment, the literal split second of cosmic history. It's a beautiful film that gives a humanity to the native peoples who are often idealized in the sort of white guilt of American culture, always idealizing, doing the dances with wolves thing with native culture, being able to see the good and the bad, being able to see these people in all of their humanity despite their relatively primitive conditions, and see the utter inhumanity of that empire, that beginning of a great and powerful civilization in the Americas, but at the expense of literally ripping out people's hearts and throwing their corpses down stairwells, at the expense of all of the horrible things that humans tend to do to one another because we are sinful, imperfect beings living in an imperfect world. And so more than any other film, Apocalypto gives you the realism of that empire, the realism of the humanity of the natives, their good side, their bad side, all the joy and the wonderful things they had, and all of the human decadence that goes with that, regardless of time, place, continent, race, language, etc. Apocalypto is available. I watched it for free on Tubi. Great movie. I hadn't seen it in many years. Watched it again. Check it out and let me know what you think.